We got to go back on our Wayback Machines, back to 1778. We got to go back with Mr. Peabody and Sherman back to the northwestern part of Virginia. And we're fighting the British. The British make it pretty easy to fight. Is my guitar on?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, you can hear it, but they can't in the back. We're fighting the British. The British make it pretty easy to fight. They wear bright red. They march in a straight line, and they wear tall hats. But if you can have a better vantage point to, I don't hear it coming over the, it is not coming over the speakers. We did sound check. It needs to come way up. There we go. I told you it wasn't on. No, it's on, he said. They said it's on. That's right. That's on, okay? So, but what they did was Lieutenant Colonel George Rogers Clark, he's there with his militia fighting the British, and he takes his militia and they build a fort. But they didn't build the fort on the mainland. They wanted to get a better vantage point, so they go in this island in the middle of the Ohio River, right before the falls. And that's the only obstruction between Pittsburgh, you know, where Pittsburgh has that Three River Stadium. So the Three Rivers, you know the Three Rivers? Allegheny, the Monongahela, and the Ohio. That's an Alabama song, I think, right? And so they comes down into the Ohio River, and the only obstruction between there and where it joins into the Mississippi River to come down here to New Orleans is the Falls of the Ohio, right there. And so that's where they put up their because they knew that the British, if they came by rafts, they'd have to portage their boat. And then even if they were on land, they could see them from the island. So they had to be self-sufficient. They hunted on the mainland in Virginia, but they planted the native crop right there at the fort. And the native crop grew so well, they nicknamed the little island Corn Island. So right there is the genesis of what's going to make our whiskey different than the whiskey from Europe, which was barley-based, you know, Irish and Scottish, and the rye-based whiskeys from Canada, New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. So when you smell this first tasting on your left, okay, that is the clear one. That is Georgia Moon in this beautiful jar here, okay? And that's of course to reflect, you know, the moonshiners and the Thunder Road and the Run and the Shine, right? But it's this is not moonshine. Moonshine's made with sugar. Okay? This is made with grains. This is actually corn whiskey. And it has a lot of restrictions on it, just like bourbon. Corn whiskey has to be what percentage of corn? Anybody know?
100%.
No.
54.
Yes. 80% corn? That's the modern laws. They didn't have laws 200 years ago. It has to be 80% corn, but that's not the big one. You don't have to age corn whiskey. And here's one. That's the only whiskey I know you don't have to age. The law states if you age it, it must be aged in a used charred barrel or a brand new charred barrel. So much different than bourbon. If you age a whiskey in a brand new charred barrel that's made from corn, the corn flavor becomes neutral. And then the sweetness remains. And then you get that big vanilla, honey, and caramel from the barrel. But if you age it in a used barrel or an uncharred new barrel, the corn flavor remains. But if you don't age it at all, it still smells and tastes like what? Corn. Because it's corn whiskey. Right? You want it to have a flavor. It's not vodka. It's not neutral grain spirits or Everclear watered down to 80 proof. It is damn good corn whiskey. So when you sip it, put enough on your tongue to give it a little chew. I worked for Jim Beam for almost 7 years. Fred No taught me to chew. Fred's here. You want to see him in a seminar or see him down at the tasting. Tell him Bernie taught you to chew. He taught me. I'll teach you. See, good. That distributes it through your whole mouth. This, while we sip on this, I'm going to play a song by Grandpa Jones about this kind of spirit, and he called it that good old Mountain Dew. Well, down the road from me, there's an old holler tree way laid down $1 Well, you go around the bend, back in there, there's a jug full of good old Mountain Dew. Well, they call it that good old Mountain Dew, and them that refuse it are few. hush of my mug if you fill up my jug with that good old Mountain Dew. Well, the preacher, he walked by, his head hoisted high, said his wife had come down with the flu. He said that I ought just give him a quart of that good old Mountain Dew. Well, they call it that good old Mountain Dew, and them that refuse it are few. I'll hush up my mug if you fill up my jug with that good old Mountain Dew. Woo! I still can't hear anything, but as long as you all can hear something, that's fine. Is that okay? Can y'all hear? Okay? Because I can't hear shit, okay? But that's okay. It's your show, not mine. Okay? So why were they doing this in the first place? Do you think they're... Yeah, well, probably because they work so damn hard. You know, this might be the, wake up. They might, just like y'all did this morning, probably just take a shot. Right? It's New Orleans. That's what you do, right? But, they're waking up with the chickens. The rooster starts crowing, you start working. You feed the animals first before you feed yourself. Then you might just take a shot because your bones need it, right? You loosen them up. You have breakfast. Breakfast, it's not like we know it today. Breakfast is ale and some bread. It's a cold meal. You can't see in the morning. You don't really have the fire going and the coal's going, so you just have bread and ale. You're more likely to drink beer or wine with every meal than you were water. Water was the liquid of last resort in the 1700s. It was Benjamin Franklin that said, "In wine there is wisdom, in beer there is freedom, and in water there is bacteria." So you were going to drink ale. And you worked all morning. Then, man, that's been a lot of the work is because the sun's not up so much. So you worked really hard in the morning, and in the midday meal is called dinner. And that's the big meal. That's the hot meal. You have sausage, you have eggs, you have a big spread, you have you fix a big meal. You've been working all day. And then at night you come home, you're like, here's do another shot of this, right? I've been working all damn day, right? And so then you might have cuts on you. So you always had iodine around the farm, right? So iodine, you put on cuts. When animals get hurt, you put the iodine on animals, or you just might want to pour it on your wounds. This is medicinal. You can heal yourself from the inside out and the outside in. Supper was a cold meal again. You might have ham and cheese and bread and ale or wine. So you would more likely to drink the wine from the area. And we had peaches. That's what we had in Virginia at the time. Peaches. Peach, you could have a thriving peach orchard in just a few years, and then you got the natural yeast in the air that comes, and you make a wine. You remember Barney on Andy Griffith, right? And the apple cider got hard, right? And then he got drunk in front of the mayor and the governor, remember? And so then, and then you would everybody was legal for you to have a 50-gallon pot still, and then you could turn that wine into brandy. And then that brandy is going to last because that wine and beer and ale is only like 2% alcohol. It's not going to last more than an afternoon or a day. Okay? So you put in some pottery, corn cob on top, doesn't last very long. But if you take that beer and put it into that copper pot still, you're going to have whiskey. And that's why they did it. It preserved the grains and made it into high-proof medicine and all that. This is not something they sip and savor next to a fire with their friends. They might start the fire with it. So that's why we were doing it in the first place. It was only until years later, a couple decades later, history happened during that. We won the Revolutionary War. We ratified our Constitution. George Washington became president. Anybody want to guess what year George Washington became president and we started our country? Everybody thinks it's 1776, but it's not.
1789.
Very good, 1789. It's on the front of our Elijah Craig barrels. That's the same year that he started making whiskey. So we had to fight a war to win our independence from 1776 to 1789. And so it took a long time, and then after that, we became the 15th state in 1792. Anybody know what the 14th state is? Vermont. We're actually a commonwealth. There's 3 other commonwealths. What are they?
Virginia.
Virginia.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, that's right, and Kentucky. Now it's Guam as also, and Puerto Rico. Anybody know what a Commonwealth is? Neither do I, so if you find out, damn it, we're one of 4. We're proud of it. We don't even know what it is. So then we named the city there, right at the Falls of the Ohio, because we won the war, and the French king lent us all the money, and so we named it after him, King Louis. So Louis the 16th. We named it after him because St. Louis did the same thing to King Louis the 14th. Okay, so St. Louis is named after him. They're an older city than we are, even though they're further west. And then down here was a very French area too. So we named a county after the same king that they named that famous street that you were on last night. So the last name of King Louis is Bourbon. So we named a county after him too. And that county became the name of what this whiskey is going to be known as. So right here we have a unique recipe, corn, that's different from all the other whiskeys. And now we have a future name that's not called that yet. Everybody's just calling it whiskey. And as we grow, and folks like Evan Williams and Elijah Craig, Basil Hayden, who brought the first Catholic families into Kentucky, the first St. Joe's there, where Freddie, you know, I went to his wedding a few years ago. Freddie and Kay got married. St. Joe's Cathedral, that's the oldest Catholic diocese west of the Allegheny Mountains. Okay? It's a very Catholic area down there. It's Gethsemane, okay, and there's a seminary down there and everything, and a nunnery, as my dad would call it. I was a nunnery. And so, a lot of history there. But they were taking the whiskey that they were starting to get, you know, there was money in it, because you could trade whiskey like money. So money wasn't really trusted, and it wasn't in each state there had their own money. So you were more likely to be able to trade a jar of whiskey or a you know, any kind of whiskey as money. So it was a big deal. Okay? And then they transported it down here. Right? They would put it on these Kentucky longboats, were just like big Tom Sawyer rafts, and they put the barrels. And so we have to give credit to the first rick houses, which were boats, because that's where aging happened originally. So as it sits on those boats, you know, the sun shines on those barrels, and they didn't want to put their good whiskey into a barrel that came from Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, and it had salts or brine or vinegars in them. Because barrels are expensive and hard to come by today. Connor pays $170 for every barrel he fills. $170 today. It's a lot of damn money, considering we fill 1,300 a day. I mean, do the math quick in my head. That's $221,000 a day in wood before we make the first drop. Wow. We fill 400,000 barrels a year. That's $68 million in wood before we make the first drop. So they're expensive. So they burned it out to sterilize it from those pickles. We don't have to do that anymore. We're getting them brand new and we're charring them ourselves. But that's where the magic happened. That's where we learned it from. Because when we burned it out, the natural sugars from the wood rushed to that inside layer of that wood. And they call that the red line. Because when it gets hot on a raft in the middle of the Ohio River, that whiskey soaks. Fred told me, Booker called it soakage. It's soaked up into that wood, going through that red line, picking up that beautiful amber color, that red color. Or as John Ray would say, give me a shot of red eye, bartender, right? That was the good stuff. That was the aged stuff, not the clear stuff. And it squeezed back through at night, because it gets cold on the river at night. It picked up a little more of that amber color. When it got to St. Louis, it had a little bit of color to it. It was a little bit different. There was a real trip was coming down here where it took 9-10 months. And it had this color. It looked different. This is the missing link between unaged whiskey and bourbon. This is aged corn whiskey, the same exact whiskey we just had. Let's take a little sip of this. This is mellow corn. One of Evan's and mine favorite whiskeys.
Yeah, maybe.
It's the only bottled and bond straight corn whiskey in the world. This is a true unicorn, and it's available every day. People say, I never see it. You know, I say, well, you're looking up. You gotta look down sometimes. Sip this. This is corn. You're tasting the grain because it's been aged in a used barrel, just like we do 200 years ago. This is historic whiskey. This is the catfish that crawls out of the lake onto the ground. This is where we learned that aging does something to it. So this is really cool whiskey. I drink it every opportunity I can. I like it. It's my phone case, for God's sakes.
That's right on the phone, right? That's not on the case.
Well, this is a label stuck in a clear case. We do not have a lot of budget for that. But that's okay. I love this whiskey. And it is truly great. You taste it? It's 100 proof. Doesn't really taste it. It's bottle of bottle. It's a little hot, but taste that vanilla, honey, and caramel. It's wonderful. It's historic. I like to sip this with a beer. Down here, I like a Abita, so I'm drinking a Abita Amber, and I'll sip on this. I love it in a Paloma. It makes a great Paloma. It's awesome. Bartenders all over the world love working with this product because there's nothing like it. You've seen tonight when you go to the grand tasting, go by the Balcones table. They do wonderful things and have great award-winning corn whiskeys. I think when Chips first started Balcones, he used mellow corn as an inspiration because he's like, I can't compete with Heaven Hill. I can't compete with Old Forester and Brown-Forman and Woodford. I can't compete with Jim Beam with bourbon. They're doing it pretty good. Nobody seems to be making aged corn whiskey. I'll go there. Right? And so this was their inspiration. And so this is the deal. Those are aged great. They're aged in Texas in smaller barrels, so they don't put as much age on them. But this is 4 full years of age, and it's a true Eagle Scout and Green Beret of whiskey because it's a bottle of bond. So let's sip on this. And I'm going to play you a song that we could have heard in 1815. And we're sipping on a whiskey that we could be drinking in 1815. Get your copper kettle. Get your copper coil. Fill it with new made corn mash. And never will you toil. As you lay there by the juniper, while the moon shines bright, watching them jugs a filling into the pale moonlight. My daddy, he made corn whiskey. Granddaddy did too. Oh, we ain't paid no whiskey tax since 1792. As you lay there by the junipers, while the moon shines bright, watching them jugs a filling into the pale moonlight. Build your fire with hickory ash and oak. Oh, don't use no green or rotten wood. They'll get you by the smoke. As you lay there by the junipers, while the moon shines bright, watching them jugs a building into the pale moonlight, into the pale moonlight. So they wanted to know what this whiskey was called because it wasn't just whiskey. It looked like and tasted like nothing they'd ever seen before. So they said it has to have a different name. So they looked on the ends of the barrels because, we didn't bottle anything back then. You just put it in pottery. If you went to a bar or saloon, they'd get it right from the barrel. And they'd put it into a bottle for you. And they sell it to you by the bottle. Or they sell you to it as a shot out of the bottle. But they filled them one at a time. We didn't have bottles, really. Barrels are expensive enough. We don't have bottling lines. There's no bottles. Bottles are really expensive to be made, right? They're really thick. And they can read. There's still some around from them, but still, it's crazy. So So people would look at the ends of the barrels on Bourbon Street, and they'd say, "Oh, I just don't want whiskey. I want red eye, or I want that good." And they'd read the end of the barrel, and it said the port that it came from, which was Old Bourbon, Kentucky. And then the contents, because you can't see through a barrel, you have to put what's in the barrel, was whiskey. So they go, give me that good whiskey from Kentucky, that bourbon whiskey from Kentucky. There's one story. You see Michael Beach around here, right? He'll tell you another story. He'll say, hey, it was when they were coming on the steamboats from down here, and they had that whiskey from Kentucky on Bourbon Street. So that's pretty cool. We really don't know which one's right. I kind of go with both of them. Because, they weren't texting each other. They didn't see it on Instagram or Pinterest and say, hey, there's this bourbon whiskey now. Right? So it's pretty cool. So this is how it took decades, and when word of mouth spreads, it stuck. You might notice I'm playing Playing the guitar just a little bit different than I did on the first song. I'm using banjo picks, thumb pick, finger picks. And so that's kind of a real Kentucky way of playing the guitar. It's really a mountain way, not really so much of a Kentucky way, but a mountain way. The mountain instruments, they're a dulcimer, laptop, a dulcimer, or you got the auto harp, which is kind of like what Mother Maybelle Carter would play. Remember that? And you just kind of strum it. They're all open string instruments. Banjo's open string instrument. A slide guitar is already making a chord as you strum it. You don't have to use your left hand to make chords. It's just there. And so it's for everyday people to just be able to make music, because this is how you entertain each other. And you sing hymns. You sing songs about real people. Songs that people made up. We don't even know who wrote them. They just kind of passed down. So when you go to a Bluegrass festival, sometimes you'll see guys picking together and they go, "Hey, what version do you use?" When I'm singing "Old Folks at Home," is it do you say this phrase or that phrase? Because it's not exact. These are just songs passed down from generation to generation. So it's really cool. So that's why people love this kind of music, because it harkens back to that time. Like we just talked about, we ain't paid no whiskey tax since 1792. Right? Screw the man, right? That's why you make it at night, and they see get you by the smoke, because you got bigger than 50-gallon pot still. So they're going to get you by the smoke, because you're going to make it at night by the shine of the moon. That's what they call it, moonshine, right? So you're not during the day. So all this stuff kind of all tracks back. And so the Carter family, they were the first ones to really bring this to the forefront. 1927, right? Mother Maybelle, A.P. Carter, and Sarah Carter. And so they get together, and they bring this mountain music that they've heard to life. And they were the first people to record it, because this thing was invented. The microphone was invented in 1927. Before that, you had it singing into that horn, right? Really didn't give really good music or good, but this was different. This changed the way we listen to music. There were no records before that. Other than if they were muffled. You really couldn't hear. So they paid in Bristol, Tennessee. They paid $50 to anybody who would come and record all day with them with the Victor Talking Machine Company. What a name, right? Yeah. You know what they became? RCA Victor, right? Because they owned all the music. Can you imagine paying people $50 to play like 10 songs, and then guess what? You owned all the songs, right? And you made all the money from selling those records, right? And guess what? You made $50, which was a lot of money in 1927. But still. That's why artists to this day make money on touring. They don't make it on records, because the record companies own all the rights and make everything. So you've heard all the stories over the years on that. Anyway, another glimpse of history into there. But the Carter family would just sing a lot of the songs they didn't write. This is what they heard. They were credited with it because they planted their flag first, right? And that's okay. Like I said, they didn't get rich. So, Carter family, I don't know. On A.P. Carter's tombstone, it says, "Keep on the sunny side," because that was their biggest song. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day, it will brighten all the way, if you keep on the sunny side of life. Right there, that's Mother Maybelle, right? She's playing the lead with her thumb, and she's kind of scratching out the chords. Very simple, very simple, to the point. That's Carter family, right? It's about the words. But she also knew when she was listening back, she goes, "Well, shit, we got to fill this in." That's called a fill. It's a little something to hear, a little pleasant, something to hear at the end, because nobody ever recorded music before. Hell, no one told her how to do it. So she is unequivocally the mother of country music, Mother Maybelle Carter. She's pretty incredible. She had a daughter. Her daughter married another influential person in country music. So June Carter married Johnny Cash. Eh? And Johnny Cash, he adored the Carter family, and he always had that history. His last album, Hurt, he recorded this Carter family tune. Ironically, a song about death, right before he passed away. I am a poor, wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world below. There is no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright world to where I go. I'm going there to see my Father, going there no more to roam. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. I'm going there to see my mother. Said she'd meet me when I come. I'm just a-going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. So I love turning people on to the different folks and the different music from our state and surrounding states. They're from Virginia, so we'll claim them. We were carved out of Virginia, right? So pretty cool. So the next evolution, getting back to the whiskey, is using different grains. Now, we really don't know who used wheat. You know, Weller is really known and brought that really to the forefront. But, you know, farmers were doing this, you know, because it was a necessity. Corn is a summer grain. So what are you going to do in the winter when you've used all your corn? You're going to use more winter grains. Right? So they would put red winter wheat. That is the second largest grain that's grown in Kentucky today. If it wasn't for the bourbon distilleries, we wouldn't be growing wheat. Because where does wheat grow? Way out in the wheat fields and the plains, right? So all of our wheat comes from Kentucky, and that goes pretty much all towards bourbon. It's pretty cool. Wheat really doesn't have a lot of flavor. Wheat, you know, think about bread. You know, we're making bread. When Connor and his team wake up in the morning, they make bread first, right? They grind up grains. They put water in it. That's bread. Okay? So but you're making corn. So cornbread, you don't make a sandwich with that, do you? No, it's beautiful and flavorful and sweet and dense. It's like a dessert, right? And there's not much of it. You get a little muffin part of it. It's right there with the meal, right? So you eat it. When you make a ham sandwich, you might use rye, because rye is actually a spicy, flavorful grain, right? So that's why we use rye. It's got flavor in it, right? Got that caraway flavor. So it's an ingredient in the ham sandwich. Let's say now you got cured meat, because that's what they did. They put hooks inside of their chimneys back in the 1800s and 1700s, and you smoked bacon and you smoked meats. Right? Country ham was hung up, right, and cured. Well, that beautiful curedness you don't want to cover up with big flavorful bread, so you use wheat. You know, wheat is the vodka of bread. It has no flavor. Right? So wheat brings out the sweetness of the corn and the barley. Barley has sweetness too. It's not a big grain. Corn's the huge grain that has a lot of sweetness and flavor. Barley has a little bit of sweetness, but it's a small little grain. Right? It has that enzyme though that changes those sugars to those starches to the fermentable sugars. But also, Parker Beam told me that barley has a tactile feel at the end, and it's that biscuity quality. So look for that in this. So this is a wheat bourbon. This is the Old Fitzgerald recipe. If you go to heavenhilldistillery.com, you'll see all of our recipes. Okay, this is 68% corn, 12% malted barley, and 20% wheat. So it's 80% sweet and 20% wheat. So it's going to be soft and sweet all in front of your palate. No spice in the back of your palate. And go Cats. I'm an SEC guy. What do you think? Do you feel it? So we haven't tasted anything spicy yet. So the corn whiskey we had is all front of your palate. Even though there's 8% spice in there, we really didn't use a brand new charred barrel yet. This doesn't have any spice in it other than baking spices like nutmeg or stuff like that. So this is the small batch version of Old Fitzgerald. So it's got, doesn't have an age. We use a mingle of ages. Everybody has a team. It's not just a master distiller who puts together our small batch and single barrel bourbons, okay? Connor's been with us for 2 months, so he can't take credit for this yet. He's getting his feet underneath him, and he's got the world's largest bourbon distillery. But you know what? No matter who the master distiller is, Connor will tell you that his only job is not to change anything, right? Is to keep everything the same. So what Earl Beam did and Parker Beam did, he's supposed to do just that. And then we have another team, which he is a part of, and sometimes I'm pulled into it. We have a tasting panel of people in the distillery, and they might work in warehousing or bottling or in the office, and they taste things. So larceny is a mingle of ages, 4 years and up, and then it's larceny old, okay? So it doesn't have an age. It's not 7 years old or 6 years old. It's larceny old, right? It's a mingle of ages for its own flavor profile. Woodford Reserve does it, right? Maker's Mark does it. Anything without an age statement on it, it's that old. We know it's over 4 years. Yes, Evan?
Something just popped into my head when you were talking about, excuse me, Colin back there. Between master distillers, I mean, it's probably the same person who's flipping the switches and running. Who is that guy? Who's the guy who kept it running in between master distillers?
Well, Connor, how many people do we have on a shift in a 24-hour shift? There's 3 shifts. How many people are on a shift? So 6 operators and what was the first part? 1 supervisor and 6. So those are the people. Okay. And you know, let's be honest. It's 2019. We have computers that are actually turning the valves and the switches, and that might not sound too sexy to you, but be thankful for that, right? It's a very big place. And you know, back in the 60s and 70s, you know, sometimes you're sucked into buying those old Dusties, and you might spend $200 and you taste it. Have you ever been really disappointed? You know, oh shit, this doesn't taste all that great. Right? Let's pay $200 for this. We better play it up, right? It's because sometimes the quality control wasn't consistent. Imagine, you know, it's 1960s. Everybody smokes, right? So you go out, and the still's doing okay. You come back after a smoke break, come back, oh shit, it's coming, there's some red line whiskey coming up. You know what red line whiskey is? It's coming way too high up into the 160 range, and we can't make bourbon over 160. So if it's going from, you know, we used to bring it off at 107, okay, off the still, and in the barrel at 107. And now we do it at 140, because it's just, technology is different. We get more yield and stuff like that. Sometimes we are in the bourbon business, not the bourbon charity. But that's where you get the big barrel proofs, and people want that now. But anyway, you come back, oh shit, it's coming off at 150. That's red line whiskey. It's supposed to come off at 107. Is that whiskey going to taste different in the barrel after? Hell yeah, it's going to taste different. So the consistency was all over the board, because they'd have to go in and manually turn valves and get it. And it's not like, you know, a stove. It doesn't just turn off them automatically. It's going to run too hot for a long time. Right? So thank God for computers now and things like that. But it's those people running it every day. So what do you think about this larceny? Pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's good.
1850s, 1860s. We're no longer using Kentucky boats. This is a cool place to talk about Kentucky boats too, because they ended here. Those boats they were made for the river. They weren't made for the ocean. So when they got down here from Kentucky, they got off the boat, they sold everything, including the boat, right? And of course they didn't need all these boats, so what did they do with them? They broke up the wood, and they built things with them. So where Steve Wilshire lives, he works for us. Everybody say hello to Steve. Say, hey Steve.
Hey Steve.
He's going to be ready to be another daddy. He's going to have another baby boy here in a little bit. But he lives in the Irish Channel neighborhood here, and the Irish Channel was built, a lot of those homes have that wood in them. So the boats that ended here, those houses are still standing. That's how good that wood was back there in those old growth forests. But in the 1850s, 1860s, the country's growing out west. And it was the trains who got it out there. So here's a little homage to those trains that got the bourbon and the whiskey out west. Riding on that new river train. Riding on that new river train. That same old train brought me here, is gonna carry me back home again. Darling, you can't love too. Darling, you can't love too. You can't love too. Still be true. Oh, darling, you can't love too. Darling, you can't love three. Darling, you can't love three. You can't love three and still love me. Oh, darling, you can't love three. Riding on that new river train. Riding on that new river train. That same old train brought me here's gonna carry me back home again. Same old train brought me here's gonna carry me back home again. So we come to we're making good whiskey. We got a reputation. We got a name. We're bourbon. We're not just whiskey. We got a name. Right? Things are happening. It's like in The Jerk, the movie The Jerk. Right? And he gets his name in the phone book, and he goes, "Good things are going to happen to me now." But then what happens to Nathan? Right? Die, you bastard! Right? He gets shot at. And that's kind of what happened to whiskey. We had good things going. And good things are going to start happening now. We got a law. Oh my God, we got a law because people were making, just adding everything. They would add iodine. They had on the farm, they had a little color. They were making vodka, putting iodine and different flavors and colors in it and calling it whiskey. Well, hell, you can't do that. So they passed a law called the Bottle and Bond Act in 1897. Bottle and Bond. Corn's a bottle and bond whiskey. Rittenhouse Rye's a bottle and bond whiskey. Evan Williams has a bottle and bond whiskey. I think that's one of your favorites. Yeah.
Better than Pappy.
There you go. We have Henry McKenna, #1 bourbon of the world last year. It's bottle and bond, right? We have Sacred Bond, the only bottle and bond great brandy in the world, right? These have laws and restrictions. And so in 1897, they passed a law saying if you want to be bottle and bond, and now there's a reason to bottle things, because now we control it. So we actually put it in bottles and say bottle and bond, which means it comes from the same class of materials, the same types of spirits. I cannot put corn whiskey with bourbon and call it bottle and bond. Those are two different spirits and classifications, two different materials, right? Even though the materials are the same, it's different wood that it's aged in. So it stands alone. Then it has to be from one distillery. We have the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience in downtown Louisville, and we have Bernheim. We can't do that. We can't mingle those two together. That's two different things. It has to come from one distilling season, a 6-month period. That's why any brand that's bottle and bond is not a huge monster brand. You'll never see a big brand. They're under 100,000 cases a year usually, because it's from a finite number of barrels you can make in a 6-month period. You can't add iodine to it. You can't add battery acid to it. You can only add pure water. Oh boy, that kind of, I guess you better use a good barrel, right? To give it that good color and flavor, because I can only use pure water to get it down to proof, and I can't water it down too much and make more money on it. I got to only water it down to 50% alcohol or 100 proof. Right on my arm, 100 proof, right?
Hey,
That's it. And this is like 10 or 11 years old. I figured I didn't just get on the bandwagon on bottle and bond. I am the bandwagon. Then you have to tell who made it. So, because people were sourcing it from anywhere, right? I'll buy it from you, I'll buy a couple of things, I'll buy a few gallons from you, I'll put some color in, flavors. No, it's got to come from one place. You got to put the real name of the place on it. And then you got to put, if that, because we own different trade names, because you can use different trade names, but we use a DSP. And then DSP stands for Distilled Spirits Plant, which we are, because we're regulated by the United States government. We have to register it, right? We're a KY because we're in Kentucky. And our number, anyone know what our number is? 1, because we're the best. Yeah, it's just our number. Mr. Bernheim got that number back in the 1700s, and right after Prohibition, he got the same number. So it's pretty cool. Colonel Beam wanted his same number from before, so he has DSP KY 230. He thought that would be good luck to have that same number. Pretty cool. DSPs are important to distillers, right? Everybody knows their distiller number. And so it's the most restricted whiskeys in the world. Spirits, doesn't just have to be whiskeys. So when I look at words on labels, or like Boy Scouts earning badges, or military men and women earning medals, you have to earn the word whiskey. You have to earn the word bourbon. You have to earn the word corn. You have to earn the word straight. That's been aged for 2 years, right? You have to earn the word Kentucky. It has to be made in Kentucky. Right? Would you rather have Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey or Florida straight bourbon whiskey? Case closed. Okay. Well, also it's the aging, because it's all hot in Florida, so it's going to age different, right? It's water. We can clean up the water. But I don't know if I want North Dakota straight bourbon whiskey, right? Because it's all cold, no hot. We need that differences of material. So Kentucky's important. Right? But if it says bottle and bond, then it's the Eagle Scout. It's got all the badges. It's got to earn all that plus that. It's the Eagle Scout. It's the Green Beret or Navy SEAL. It's got all the medals. So like I said, we got good things are going to happen to us now. We got a law. We got everything. So, but what happens on was it January 16th? 1920? Call it a night. The party's over. It's time for all good things to end. Call it a night. Party's over. And for 14 long years, then we can do it all over again. So 14 years of Prohibition. Shit, that's a long time. You had the people, because we did have a kind of a drinking problem. Most people drinking too much, because why? Because a lot of people just lived in these little boarding houses. It took a lot to own a house and land, and you had to be pretty well off to have that, or pass that land down from family to family. So most people just rented a room, kind of like it was the early Airbnbs, right? So you rent a room at Mrs. Carson's boarding house, right? And you just it's like a hotel, but it was kind of long term. But you'd move on, and you might live in several different places. And so you never really had anything mailed to you there, because you didn't know where you're going to be. So wherever things really are mailed to you, at your bar, because you were going there, right? And the people knew you there, right? And but that's where you found jobs too, because there would be jobs posted in the saloon. There'd also be people opening the door. Hey, I'm hiring 3 people today. Who wants to work today? There'd be announcements. There'd be ceremony. There'd be things happening. So everybody kind of women weren't allowed there unless they were working. And they weren't allowed to bartend, so I'll let you use your imagination to know what kind of work they were working. Right? So it was a man's place. It was the first place that men went. That's why, where the rich people went? Gentlemen's clubs. And I'm not talking about the ones next to the airport, right? Or the ones on Bourbon Street, right? They were rich men sitting around drinking good whiskey and smoking cigars, right? So people were drinking too much. And then and it was just two sides, today, just like back then, we are as divided as we ever were. And then too, because you were either for Prohibition or again. You were nobody in the middle. But they tried to do it in the middle, because people said, well, let's just do away with whiskey. Let's keep beer and wine, right? And so the beer companies were all behind that. Budweiser on that. Well, let's just do that. That'd be good, right? They were all in on that. And so people said, no, total abstinence or nothing. Total or nothing, right? So total abstinence. They would go to rallies and parties, and they would sign their names, and at the end they would put a big capital T. Total abstinence. Total. And that's when you're a teetotaler. If you put a total capital T, you're a teetotaler for total abstinence. Right? So that's a cool piece of history, right? So it wasn't until December 5th, 1933, 14 years later, that we were able to have the 21st Amendment, which struck down the 18th Amendment, and now we can have whiskey again and make it. You know, you could get whiskey during Prohibition, but it was through a doctor's prescription. It was usually bottled and bond because it was under federal guidelines and federal restrictions and under the supervision. So people knew what bottle and bond was, so that's what you wanted to come out with. So when our family opens up and we buy 200 acres of land in Bardstown, Kentucky, where we sit today, and it's the William Heaven Hill Farm. Right? And so we're Heaven Hill. Right? And so it sounds like a place, sounds like a heavenly place. Even though it was a real gentleman, it sounds like a place. Huh? So it's really cool. And so we wait, because we're not, and the people who made Canadian whiskey, they didn't have Prohibition. So they had aged stocks ready to go. So on December 6th, it flowed into the United States. Okay? Was it President Kennedy's dad, right? He owned Johnny Walker or Dewar's distributorship, and he had ships just circling, ready, full of Scotch whiskey, ready to come in on December 6th, because he heard rumblings it was going to be over, right? Irish whiskey flowed into the United States. But we had to make it and wait 4 years. So that's a big thing to overcome. Then you can make something called blended whiskey. You can make kind of blended whiskey today and sell it tonight if you want. So you can add colors and flavors to it, right? So Seagram's 7 comes out. Yeah? Seagram's 5 blend, Kessler, Philadelphia, a few brands like that. Yeah? So, but bourbon had a hard time coming back. Then we had World War II, and all of our distilleries got recruited in contracts to make high-proof alcohol, to make parachutes and different synthetics for the war effort. So we really never came back. And in the 50s and 60s, the 1-2 punch really put us down for the count. Before that, we never had vodka in the United States. We never had tequila. And that really put us down. And we were hurting. If we only made American whiskey, you went out of business. You were bought up by larger companies. So that's when Pappy Van Winkle's company sold. When they were broke in 1971. Jim Beam sells to American Tobacco Company in 1963. You had Maker's Mark sells in 1981 to a Canadian company, Hiram Walker, and they were losing money. Our company, our family was encouraged by their distributor partners to go into other spirits. So we were always pretty financially sound. And that's when we started buying up and became acquirers of brands. And our family was pretty smart. Ed Shapiro was pretty smart. He buys up JTS Brown, J.W. Dant, Virgin Bourbon, Mellow Corn, Rittenhouse Rye, Pikesville Rye. You know, if it sells, like I said before, if it's a cool little loyal brand over here, 50,000 cases here, 50,000 cases there, 70,000 cases here, that's pretty good. You put it all together, it's pretty good. They launched Evan Williams in the 1950s. Yeah. Elijah Craig in the 1986. Right? So there's brands you nurture, but there's other brands you buy. That's why we have a very large, confusing, cluttered portfolio today. And we still have them. We feel we're the keepers of historic brands. As the business grows, some of them go away. Sorry, not sorry. Why'd you do away with the Heaven Hill 6 years? Well, fuck, where do you live? Evan lives in Michigan, still pissed off about it. Right? Hell, you don't even live here. It's only in Kentucky. You don't even live here. You're mad. Okay? Yeah, things happen. You got to do things. But anyway, it wasn't until the mid-1980s, that men with vision and necessity launched the small batch and single barrel categories that made the overnight success, the 35-year overnight success of why we sit here. In the last 8 years, this has really been on fire. Okay? So, 1984, Elmer T. Lee, God bless Elmer T. Lee, comes out with the first single barrel, Blanton's, they called it, after the gentleman that owned the distillery. Actually, he interviewed with Colonel Blanton on his first day. You know what Colonel Blanton told Elmer T. Lee? He says, "Sir, I'm looking for a job." He says, "We have no jobs for you today, son." Wow. So, this was Blanton's. Blanton's was 9 years old, 93 proof, and you know, people weren't buying old whiskey back then. But you know, because it was so depressed, old whiskey got older, right? So I told my dad, who lived to be 94 years old and drank a quart of bourbon a day, I said, "Dad, you need to start drinking some of this older stuff. You know, there's Elijah Craig, there's Knob Creek, there's this Blanton stuff." You know what my dad told me? He said, "Son, I don't trust a bourbon over 6 years old. You drink Heaven Hill, green label, 6-year-old, 90 proof. You still have it in Kentucky today." I said, what do you mean trust? He says, if it's over 6 years old, I'm telling you, that's just the shit they can't sell. And he had a point, because if it doesn't sell, it becomes older in the rick house. And you're not just going to throw it away. You've paid taxes on it. You've paid for that barrel. You want to sell it. So if you were on the brand team back then, and if you were trying to sell old whiskey that nobody wanted, how would you do it?
Put it in a fancy bottle.
You'd put it in a fancy collectible decanter. And Blanton's is in a cool little decanter, and just for the little kicker of it, it spelled out Blanton's, and each little writing jockey was a little bit different, and you might collect it. Right? When we came out with, think of those bean bottles, yeah? Shaped like cars, shaped like boats, shaped like trains, shaped like telephones, right? Shaped like was it Charlie McCarthy, right?
Yeah.
Right? You might buy the bottle, but you ain't gonna buy the old whiskey. And there's some damn good old whiskey in those labels. You look at, they tried to hide the age because nobody wanted old whiskey. So they'd say this whiskey's 120 months old. Because they know in Kentucky we can't do math. 120 months old? What is that, 8 years old? It's 10. See, we can't do it, right? It doesn't sound 10 years old. Someone will say 150 months old. Well, shit, now I'm gone. I'm done. And now it's some of the most collectible decanters you can buy because it's old whiskey from the old days. So everybody hunts out for those. So it was Max Shapira and Parker Beam who all of a sudden proudly put Elijah Craig and put a huge number 12 in red on the front. Did it on purpose. That was groundbreaking. Max knew, they tried the decanters before, it didn't really work too good. So he said, well, shit, we're not going to do that anymore. Let's try to sell old whiskey. So Elijah Craig was one of the groundbreakers of selling old whiskey on purpose in a bottle. He did charge a premium for it because it's older. So when Elijah Craig came out, it was $9.99. Double the price of Heaven Hill. Sat on the shelf and got dusty. Right next to Blanton's, but sat on the shelf and got dusty. Booker comes out with, Fred's daddy comes out with Booker's in late 1980s. Booker's was barrel proof. Booker himself didn't like old whiskey. He's like my dad. He didn't like anything over 8 years old, 9 years old, right? That's why Knob Creek was the oldest they had at 9 years old. He liked his favorite whiskey was 6 to 8 years old. And it was barrel proof because he saw people's eyes light up when he put the little glass underneath the barrel and he'd go, man, they love that. Let's do that. And it sat on shelves and got dusty. It was the first $50 bottle. Man. Then you had Lincoln Henderson. Over where Connor used to work there, they started Woodford Reserve. That was pretty cool, right? Jimmy Russell, Eddie's daddy. He comes out with a rare breed and Russell's Reserve. Right? 10 years old. Jimmy says to this day, nothing. I don't want to put my name on anything over 10 years old. Right? That's how Eddie's on the 17-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. Jimmy ain't going to sign it. Right? So there's still some of that. Right? It's just preference. Right? So Elijah Craig, and then Evan Williams Single Barrel comes out in the 90s. So this fourth whiskey we're tasting is Evan Williams Single Barrel. Parker thought it'd be fun, say, just kind of like that, like the Bottle and Bond, but for the whole year, he put the year, the vintage on it. That's the only vintage dated single barrel on the planet. Seems like a small thing, but it's pretty cool, sets it apart. You ever seen vertical tastings of different years? It's not neat. They're all single barrels. They're different. They're hand labeled on the back. This one's about 8 years old. It was done in 2011 and bottled in 2019. It's usually around there. Yes.
I have the entire collection from beginning to end.
Wow.
I'm very proud of that.
You should be. That is very cool. And I'm sure you drink out of them too. I'm sure.
Everything gets open.
That's right. That's at your house. It does. That's right. Mine too. I'm a drinker, not a collector.
Cheers.
So here's to Parker Beam. Parker Beam, he was with our company for 56 years. Damn it, that's a long time. Yeah. So here's to Parker. Thanks for having the vision to bring these products out. And Max Shapira and the Shapira family.
Cheers.
This has the first spice we're going to taste. This is that back of the palate spice. Yeah. 86.6 proof. The vanilla in this, the vanillas, honey, and caramels really come through. This is under $30 a bottle. Some of the best bourbon. And you can take advantage of this because this is available in your stores every single day. People always looking for those unicorns. Why are you going to look for a unicorn? Hey, you should look for them. Buy them when they're there. Buy the gold dust when it's there. They're always on the top shelf. So you put a brick down and step up. So you put down a mellow corn, or you put down a J.W. Dan or an Evan Williams bottle of bond. You step on that. You grab the gold dust. Don't forget to put the gold brick in the cart too. But look for this. This is under 30 bucks. And trust me, no one in our company knows what the hell to do with this brand. We don't know how to build it. We got too many whiskeys, right? This one kind of splits that. This and Evan Williams 1783, two of the coolest value bourbons on the planet today that are available every single day in your store. Grab them next time you see them. You won't spend 40 bucks for both bottles. And they're absolutely incredible. You like this whiskey?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely incredible. You know, we lead the way. There's the Henry McKenna, as I talked about. We'll have it at the table tonight at the Grand Tastings. So come by and have some. That is named the world's best bourbon last year in San Francisco Spirits Competition, which they're judging right now, and this weekend. And that really put that brand on the map. That was my first favorite bourbon at Heaven Hill. I was tasting them blind, but and I was like, man, I like this. Because I came from Beam. I like Knob Creek. That was 9 years old, 100 proof. There's 10 years old, 100 proof. Come on, it's in my wheelhouse. It's right there, right? I loved it. And then I found out it's Bottle and Bond. Well, shit, I'm in. You know, Bottle and Bonds, like I said, they hold a special place in my heart. They are, you know, there's probably 2,000 craft distillers in the United States today. 2,000. Probably make a couple brands each. There's 10 major distilleries that make a lot of brands. There's over 4,000 labels of American whiskey on the market today.
Wow.
There's less than 30 Bottle and Bonds.
Wow, really?
When I say it's the Eagle Scout or the Green Beret or the Navy SEAL, it is. So every Bottle and Bond. There you go. We're getting invaded. So Bottle and Bonds didn't hit the market until 1939. And I've been playing bluegrass music and never talked about this gentleman until now. Bill Monroe from Rosine, Kentucky. He came out and he had a little, he put this instrumentation together. The guitar players from the area. He had a slide guitar, which we now call dobro, was in there. Banjo, which Earl Scruggs transformed to just a strumming instrument, as here's in like Dixieland, where they just strum the instrument. But he picked it with those picks and has that distinctive sound that we know today. Bill Monroe played the mandolin, which was just a strumming instrument and a background parlor instrument, but he turned it into a hard-driving lead instrument. Fiddle players, bass players, and just like the jazz musicians of the late 30s and 40s, each musician was very accomplished and can take their own musical interpretation of the song in between the verses. It was really cool. So you can hear two different bands play the same song and enjoy them both and want to go see them both, right? Because Bill Monroe was a hard ass to work for. Right? He was a very hard taskmaster, right? And a lot of people didn't stay in his band. So he had hundreds and hundreds of people who left in his band. But he created bluegrass music, so you built your resume by being in his band. So Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt were in his band, but they left and started their own band. Ralph Stanley was in his band, but left. Right? Del McCurry played guitar in Bill Monroe's band, but he left, and now they're the Traveling McCurrys and Del McCurry, you know, who's kind of the godfather right now. Ricky Skaggs, who didn't play in Bill Monroe's band, but that was his inspiration. That's why he plays the mandolin and all that. So you can't build a bourbon with one distillery, right? You need a lot of distilleries. That's why you see us all, and people are saying, hey man, you guys are pretty friendly to each other. Well shit, yeah, you can't do it with one, right? And let's just keep in mind, Jack Daniels outsells the entire bourbon category combined. We gotta stick together, right? So this is a tribute to Bill Monroe. So you just sip on the Evan Williams single barrel and finish the other whiskeys before we get to the last one. Everybody knows Blue Moon in Kentucky. It's a waltz. I'm not going to play that. Because everybody knows that one. I want to introduce you to something different, right? This is my favorite Bill Monroe song. We were waltzing that night in Kentucky beneath the beautiful harvest moon. I was the boy that was lucky, but it all ended too soon. As I sit here alone in the moonlight, I see your smiling face, and I long once more for your embrace in that beautiful Kentucky war. As I sit here alone in the moonlight, I see your smiling face, and I long once more for your embrace in that beautiful Kentucky war. Can you hear New Orleans in my voice? Can you hear Bourbon Festival in my voice? Damn it, we get there. Bluegrass is kind of like jazz. You kind of get there, you get in the neighborhood, you're okay. Right? We'll finish off with Elijah Craig. Same exact grain bill as the Evan Williams single barrel, which means it's the same exact grain bill as Evan Williams. Regular black label, extra aged. Elijah Craig, barrel proof, 2 years ago was named Whiskey of the World. Not Bourbon of the World, Whiskey of the World. By Whiskey Advocate magazine at Whiskey Fest will be in Chicago and DC coming up. Do you think, did anybody like Elijah Craig Barrel Proof? Do you agree that it's Whiskey of the World? If you agree that that's Whiskey of the World, Evan Williams Extra Aged Black Label, the #2 selling bourbon in the world, is the same damn whiskey. It's just 5 years old, not 12. So do you think that's a pretty good base whiskey to start with? If you're going to have an everyday bourbon, I think I'd grab that one. Yeah. Because it's whiskey of the damn year, right? So if we don't label it by brand, we don't say, hey, that's going to be barrel proof. It just says bourbon whiskey. On the board at Connor's team, when they run Evan Williams or Elijah Craig, it doesn't say a brand. It says HH Reg, right, Connor? It says HH Reg. That's it. That's what the barrels say. Bourbon whiskey. HH Reg. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Which one are we drinking?
You're drinking the small batch, which is no longer 12 years old. Because you people are so damn thirsty. We couldn't keep up with the 12-year age statement, right? So we took the age statement off, and now it's barrels 8 to 12 years old. So it's still got some really old whiskey in it. Think about it. Knob Creek couldn't keep up with 9 years old, and they're the #1 bourbon company in the world. So how are we going to keep up with a 12-year age statement, right? And but we started 8 years old. So let's just think that Knob Creek's 8 years old. Okay, that's where we start. Okay, not that Knob Creek's bad. I love Knob Creek. I still love drinking Knob Creek. I was on Knob Creek's team for 6 years. You can still lick my arm and taste Knob Creek. I love Knob Creek, but it's not Elijah Craig. Okay, it's different. There's no better in this world, right? Can we all just get along? We all do, right? We all get along. I love Knob Creek, and damn it, I love Elijah Craig, right? Woodford, they say it's it's around 7 years old. It's a mingle of ages. Starts at 8. Come on, this is some damn good old whiskey. It's a 94 proof. You smell this and taste this, and if you put this next to Henry McKenna, okay, which is also the same grain bill, this is darker.
Yeah.
So it's darker, and Henry McKenna's 10 years old and 100 proof. It's stronger and older, and this is still darker. What does that tell you? There's older whiskey in here. A lot of 11 and 12-year-old whiskey in here.
Put them in the same char barrels?
Yes.
Same char?
Yeah. #3 char, and so we use the same char and the same barrel and the same proof for everything. Okay. Parker said, "You got to make it easy, Bernie. People screw up." He didn't say screw though. He said different words.
You know what they're calling the old 12-year-old red bottles now?
No, what are they calling it?
Clifford's.
Clifford's.
Because it's got the big red 12. Like Clifford, the big red dog.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's kind of neat. We'll have to tell Max Stefka that. Start with that brand.
What's the proof on this one?
This is 94.
94.
So 47%.
And what was the larceny?
Larceny is 92. And that's another thing in Heaven Hill. When you think of Heaven Hill, you guys have to think of two words. Longer, stronger. That's our house style. So if you think of everything we do at Heaven Hill, across the board, compared to our our main competitors, we keep it in the barrel just a little bit longer because we're not controlled by Wall Street or shareholders. So we can keep it a little bit longer because they can't or choose not to. And then we put it in the bottle just a little bit stronger. In not every case, but a lot of cases. So this is not 90.4 proof or 86 proof. This is 94 proof. Evan Williams is 5 years old, 86 proof. What it plays up against is 4-year-old 80 proof or 3-year-old 80 proof. Right? So think about it, like Crown Royal or Jack or Jim, they're all 4-year-old 80. Again, another toast to Parker Beam. Connor has big shoes to fill. Earl Beam and Parker Beam. He's just doing what they said to do, and the standards that he puts down is what he's supposed to do. And please say hello to Connor in the back. He's new to our team, and let him know how welcome and how much pressure you are going to put on him to do the right thing. He welcomes it. He's a pressure player. Okay, good. But Parker Beam, he died of ALS a little over 2 years ago, and the disease gets worse as time goes on. It's a degrading disease. So but he loves coming into the visitor center and go to bourbon festivals and come down here to Tales of the Cocktail and talk to people. Do you know how hard it is to talk to people when your speech is slurred and you can't talk as well? And to see it was kind of painful, and people say, "Hey, Parker, would you sign this bottle? Would you sign this poster?" And even though his motor skills was getting worse, it was kind of hard to watch him sign. He signed it. I said, "Hey, Parker, do you want me to tell people, not?" He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Bernie, I can sign things today. I might not be able to sign them tomorrow. I can talk to people today. I might not be able to talk to them tomorrow. So let's do this, right?" People want to do it. So here's to Parker. He told me that on the day he dies, he hopes it's late in the afternoon, so I can get a lot done that day. Cheers to Parker. He died at 3:30 in the morning. He got a lot damn done that day.
Cheers.
So that's pretty damn good whiskey. So there you tasted through the evolution. Did you enjoy tasting through and seeing how bourbon became bourbon from unaged corn whiskey to aged corn whiskey to how wheat comes into it in the small batch and single barrel bourbons? Yeah. Is it a little more clear in your head how bourbon became bourbon and why we spent money to get on an airplane and come to New Orleans? Right? Because this is beautiful. And the stories, that's why we love bourbon. And the people. Go to the Grand Tasting tonight. Talk to Fred No and Freddie No. Talk to Trey Zoller over at Jefferson's. Right? See Brent Elliott over at Four Roses. Talk to everybody. Eddie Russell's right across from us tonight. And he's amazing to talk with. This is your festival, and we're here for you all to talk with and really get to know, because we can't do it. We need you all to help spread the word. Any more questions? Any more comments before we wrap up with one more song? Yes, sir.
Which came first, your music or bourbon?
Oh, well, I'm from Kentucky. So my background growing up is my father worked at a brewery. So that's my dad's ring. He passed away in 2005, and that's his company ring when people stayed at companies for 45 years. Okay, so my dad was there for 45 years. And his father was one of 13 original German immigrants who started who's a saloon keeper. So 13 German saloon keepers in Louisville started the Fall City Brewing Company because we're the Fall City. We're on the falls of the Ohio River. So we were a beer family. But my dad and mom both drank bourbon as well. So they drink beer and bourbon. So I drink beer and bourbon. So I've always drank beer and bourbon. I'm not going to apologize. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you I just drink bourbon. I'm not that kind. I enjoy beer here and there, because that's my heritage. but we always drank bourbon too. And so, and then music. I started playing music when I was in high school. Okay, I played the organ. I never played the piano, but I played organ. I was just fascinated by it. I went to horse shows, show horses, and that my sister rode horses, and they played, a guy plays an organ with the music, and I just loved it. So I was attracted to that. And when I went to the University of Kentucky, I knew they weren't going to have an organ anywhere to play. So I said, well, shit, I'll just buy a guitar. Right? And so I've been playing guitar ever since. And when I listened to Dirt, Silver, and Gold, and Will the Circle Be Unbroken, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band back in the late 70s, this is when I got the bug for bluegrass music, and I heard voices like Doc Watson, and I heard voices like Melbo Carter and Merle Travis, and different folks, and so it's been this ever since. I never really picked music until just a few years ago when we put this tasting together. My buddies who played bluegrass music, I said, I think we can tell the story of bourbon through bluegrass, let's do it, and then I've learned a little bit. So I wouldn't call myself a bluegrass picker yet, but I'm getting there. Yes, sir.
Once you retire the bourbon through bluegrass, is there any chance you'll do bourbon through comedy?
Well, hopefully you've laughed a few times.
Well, has. That's why I think it'd be such a great idea.
From 1985 to 2005, I was a touring full-time stand-up comic. So I played down here in Metairie at the Punchline. I've been to Milwaukee. That's why I was in Pewaukee. I was doing this up there. Did Zanies in Chicago, things like that. So for 20 years. So when I was getting started in the industry, I didn't know shit about bourbon in 2005. I mean, I knew as much as anybody growing up in Kentucky knew. And I know more than anybody else. But I could stand up in front of people and talk. And most of the people who were the ambassadors for the distilleries at the time were the distillers themselves. And a lot of them couldn't talk to people. They were great, and people who like Craig Beam, our distillery, Parker's son. And Craig's not a masterful command of a room, but I love presenting with him because I can make him look good. Right? I can get a few laughs and toss him a few cantaloupes, and then he'd get a laugh, and he was off, and he loved it. Now, Parker was different. Parker loved to talk. Booker loved to talk. Booker loved to talk. When Fred first started, Fred was not the speaker he is today. You know, public speaking takes a lot of time to learn, and Fred now is one of the best presenters and the best speakers that are. We're lucky to have Connor because not only is he a chemical engineer and has such great experience in the industry of running different distilleries, he can stand up in front of people and talk. And just like me, he's got a little bit of a funny accent because he's from Ireland. So that's what kind of got me into the industry, is that I can stand up in front of people and talk. And Fred Noe, who I worked for first, said, hell, he goes, if you don't know anything, just text me. I'll text you the answer, you know. So he says, and then Jimmy Russell told me too. He says, you know, I learn something every day. So you don't need to, it's like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. You don't have to know it all today. So you'll learn it, just tell people, and that's why we're all friendly with each other, because we're all promoting each other. And we're all in the same fight together. And I travel 3 weeks a month. I'm on airplanes, I'm in hotels, and we're going through this, we know the same battle fatigue. You know, hear my voice? I've been talking nonstop for 2 days. And next week I'm going, and whiskey festivals are hard. You know, you think it's just all fun. But you know, it's not hard. It's just not. And I've worked construction, and I've dug ditches, and I've carried drywall, and I've done it. Okay, put my time in. But this is different hard work, right? You gotta be. You are such beautiful fans, and you love here, and we don't want to ever do something like, oh, that guy's an asshole or whatever. You get the same question the 10th time in the hour. You want to answer it with the same enthusiasm as the first time you were asked it. So it's a different kind of a hard work. And then people say, what does it take to be an ambassador for a whiskey brand? You know, do you want to know what it takes to be an ambassador of a whiskey brand? Little bitty cups. You don't have little bitty cups, you don't have anything. So if I start thinking that I'm somebody who knows everything and I can do everything, and boy, I'm bourbon famous or something, you know what it comes down to? Ittle bitty cups. That keeps me honest. You got another tasting in front of you. Shit, and Evan, can you do me can somebody do me? I'm out. Can you have me one of those?
I'll do the single barrel because that's what's best.
There you go.
There you go, brother.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to finish off. I'll be around. I know my time's coming to an end. I really appreciate y'all taking the time. I know you could be at any seminar, and I know that you could be listening to anybody else. So I really appreciate y'all coming to listen to my story and to Heaven Hill story. We think it's an important story. Heaven Hill is still family owned and operated by the same family that started in 1935. That doesn't happen in our industry. There's one more a company that is family owned, but our family makes the distinction, they're not family operated, right? And that might sound like a small thing, but to them it's a huge thing, right? It's still really cool. And by the way, that distillery makes some pretty damn cool whiskey, right? Maybe because they're not operated by Wall Street. So that's another reason why our two distilleries make some of the coolest whiskeys and the most allocated and hard to get. That's kind of frustrating, but hang in there with us. Anybody seen that old come by our booth tonight. If anybody's in the VIP hour, we got some of that old Fitzgerald, 9-year-old, right?
Ooh, baby.
We got some Parkers. That's there. Do we still have some Parkers left? Okay. I don't want to over promise.
Steve would never let you down.
We got some Elijah Craig barrel proof. So come by, and if you're in the VIP hour, if you're not, we still have some great whiskey, the Henry McKenna and all that kind of stuff. So I want to finish off with this song. And this song is a song that I wrote, and it is a song that tells a story, and it includes 23 bourbons in the song. So I think one of your favorite bourbons will probably be in there, right? Tells a little story. It's called Distillers Row, because we go to Bardstown, you go down North 3rd Street, you go over the railroad tracks, you look over to the right, there's my old Kentucky home dinner train. And you come down the next stoplight, you go right through the stoplight, you look to the right, there's a little that's kind of big, two-story brick home. That's where Freddie No lives with his wife Kay, and Briley, their daughter, and they just had a son, Booker. Okay, he's Booker No. He's the next Booker, so that's pretty damn cool. Next door to him is his mom and dad. That's Sandy and Fred, and Fred No. They live in Booker's house, which was Jim Beam's house. It's got the big columns on it. That's just kind of the way they do it. You know, Jim Beam lived there, right? And then that's how they do it. Booker lived there, and then Fred lived there. So pressure's on Fred now, because Freddie's like, I'm in that house, right? Next door was the Samuels, Bill Samuel Sr. They live right next door. They say the first paved road in Bardstown was the sidewalk between Colonel Beam's house and Mr. Samuel's house, because they talked to each other so much, talked about the business. Across the street from there was Jack Beam's house. He made a little brand called Early Times, right? So they called it Distillers Row. Because I mentioned 23 bourbons in the song, I call this Distillers Row. There's a little bit of my dad in there too, you'll hear. My old granddad passed away, but he lived 94 years to the day. He's laid to rest right up on Heaven Hill with a spray of 4 roses on his grave. See how it works? He drank a quart each and every day of some good store-bought Jim Beam. Dr. Forrester said, ain't happy now, you better cut it down. But then the good doc passed away, so who's to say? So raise a red eye to old granddad, don't count that twice. He lived to be an ancient age. That old crow sure left his maker's mark, and now he's drinking with the angels far away. How you doing? You got 10? Damn, you're pretty good. When the weekends rolled around, oh, the stories they did flow like branch water pouring down Knob Creek. Evan Williams started to sing, Brother Elijah's voice would ring. Jimmy passed the jug to his buddy Parker Bean. So raise a red eye to old granddad, should have 16. He lived to be an ancient age. That old crow sure left his maker's mark, and now he's drinking with the angels far away. You got 16, did you get branch? That's a town branch, right? Wild turkeys they all were, and like eagles they were rare. I didn't think I could do it, right? They followed and bonded all the day, and all into the night, and Basil Hayden sheer delight. They tell stories by the cab, and still they raise red eye to old granddad, should have 20. He lived to be an ancient age. That old crow sure left his maker's mark, and now he's drinking with the angels far away. He'd throw old Fitz if he didn't get his V.O.B. Now he's drinking there with Booker far away. 23. Make sure to say hello to Connor on your way out. And I'll be around if you want to chat. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ha ha.
Well,